The crystalline blue of the sky above northern France in April 1943 was a clean, cold arena, vast and unforgiving. At precisely 27,000 feet, the air was thin, frigid, and belonged, uncontested, to the elite. Oberleutnant Rolf Hermeken, a 24-year-old ace of Jagdgeschwader 26, felt the familiar, invigorating pulse of his Focke-Wulf FW 190A5's supercharged engine. He was perfection in a machine of lethal aesthetic design. Sharp angles, lethal speed, and the tight, responsive controls of a champion fencer's foil. Below him, lumbering laboriously through the thin air, were the new arrivals. The American P-47 Thunderbolts. Hermeken could not suppress the smirk that pulled at the corner of his mouth beneath the oxygen mask. He reached for the microphone, and his voice, transmitted through the static, carried the brittle edge of veteran contempt. "They have sent us fliegende Milchflasche," he reported to his wingman. Flying milk bottles. The sheer, ugly bulk of the P-47 was a joke to the Luftwaffe. It was a barrel-shaped monstrosity, weighing a monstrous 8 tons fully loaded, nearly double the elegant 9,000 pounds of Hermeken's own FW-190. The Americans, it seemed, understood only brute force, believing that bigger was always better, a profound miscalculation that Hermeken, with his 18 confirmed kills, was eager to capitalize on. He saw the P-47 as an insult to the art of aerial combat, a clumsy product of Detroit's factory floors, designed by men who understood automobiles, not aerodynamics. His plane, the Würger, Shrike, was a finely tuned weapon. Theirs was a flying tank, a testament to industrial arrogance. It lacked the climb rate, the turning radius, and the elegant handling required for the deadly dance of high-altitude war. Hermeken had already studied the preliminary intelligence reports. The P-47 was slow to accelerate, needed impossibly long runways, and was utterly hopeless in a sustained turning fight. The American pilots, fresh out of flight school, were already exhibiting nervous, predictable tactics. Today, he would demonstrate the superiority of German finesse over American brute force manufacturing. This was not a clash of technology, Hermeken believed, but a duel of philosophies, and the elegant German philosophy would win. His chance came in the next minute. The American formation, 16 P-47Cs of the 4th Fighter Group, tightened their protective shell around a flight of B-17 bombers. Hermeken rolled his FW-190, the movement smooth and instantaneous, converting his altitude into the single most decisive asset in aerial combat: speed. His engine screamed with controlled power. The air around his canopy remained clean and stable. He broke formation, dropping in a clean vertical dive that instantly opened a massive gap between himself and the sluggish American formation. His target was the nearest P-47 on the flank, piloted by a new, inexperienced American who was visibly struggling to maintain the formation. Hermeken's mind worked with the chilling precision of a high-speed computer. He calculated the angle of deflection, the compression of the air around his wingtips, and the brief window of opportunity he had before he pulled out of the dive. This would be a boom and zoom attack, but Hermeken saw it as an execution. Quick, clean, definitive. He would fire one devastating burst, sever the liquid-cooled heart of the American engine, and be gone before the others could react. The metallic sheen of the P-47's radial engine cowling grew rapidly in his sight. He thumbed the firing button cover, the gesture instinctive. His 20mm cannon rounds and 7 92mm machine gun slugs were designed to tear through aluminum and shred the vital arteries of a conventional fighter. He imagined the scene in the P-47's cockpit. The sudden, paralyzing fear. The plume of white coolant smoke indicating a mortal wound. The swift, silent descent to earth. The German ace lined up the shot, the crosshairs steady. He held his breath, waiting for the perfect moment of convergence, the perfect expression of his mastery. He squeezed the trigger. His weapons roared, a short, violent tremor running through his airframe. He saw the flash of impact on the P-47's massive fuselage, a concentrated, focused strike exactly where the vulnerable coolant lines of an inline engine would be located. He felt the familiar rush of triumph. But instead of the expected geyser of white steam, Hermican saw only a brief flicker of metal peeling back, like paint being stripped by sandblasting. And then, everything changed. The P-47 did not waver. It did not shed oil or smoke or coolant. Instead, the American flying tank, still maintaining formation, suddenly returned fire. Not a clean burst from 2 cannons, but an immediate, shocking eruption of 8 synchronized 50-caliber Browning machine guns. The sound was not the sharp crack of his own German cannons. It was a prolonged, guttural, terrifying hammering. It was the sound of 100 rounds per second, a deafening industrial storm of steel. Hermican, still in his high-speed zoom past the target, felt the vibration of the enormous American slugs passing inches from his cockpit, the air around his FW-190 momentarily destabilized by the sheer volume of metal projected. The concentrated spray of American firepower was a wall of lead, not a focused strike. It wasn't the art of the rapier. It was the crushing, indiscriminate force of a sledgehammer. Hermican pulled out of the dive hard, the G-forces pressing him into his seat, his mind reeling not from physical stress, but from profound confusion. He was taught that his concentrated attack should have been fatal. He was taught that this heavy American machine was a soft target. But his rounds had struck a place of unexpected, cold durability. He looked back up at the formation. The P-47 was still there, the pilot banking slightly, waiting. Hermican had used skill, speed, and precision. The American had used only mass, horsepower, and a terrifying, unbelievable quantity of steel. He had underestimated the machine, believing he was fighting a duel of skill. He had unknowingly plunged into a new kind of conflict, one decided not by the elegance of design, but by the relentless, overwhelming industrial brutality of the American assembly line. His laughter, the scornful mockery of the flying milk bottle, had died instantly in the thunder of the 50-caliber barrage. He hadn't just missed a kill. He had fundamentally misunderstood the war he was fighting. Oberleutnant Rolf Hermican, his heart still hammering against the steel ribs of his armored flight vest, pulled his Focke-Wulf FW-190 into a tight, defensive turn, momentarily shaking off the massive American formations. He checked his wingman, then checked his gauges. The instruments were perfect, the engine running smooth and potent. He had achieved the tactical separation he required, but the short burst of the American 50 calibers, the sheer, crushing volume of their fire, had shattered something more than his tactical plan. It had fractured his philosophical understanding of the aerial war. The P-47 was a machine designed by what he considered industrial barbarians, lacking the elegance and efficiency of German engineering. Germany built fighters for a single, lethal purpose, the graceful, decisive killing of other fighters. Hermican's FW-190 was a masterwork of integrated design. Its powerful BMW 801 radial engine, while technically air-cooled, was streamlined, tightly cowled, and built for speed and quick reaction. It was a sniper's rifle. The American Thunderbolt, by contrast, was a flying tank, a blunt 18-cylinder Pratt Whitney R-2800 double wasp. That engine alone was a testament to the opposing philosophies. German liquid-cooled inline engines, like those in the Messerschmitt Bf-109, were engineering marvels of efficiency. They were sleek, narrow, offering minimal drag. But they possessed a fatal inherent fragility. Their lifeblood flowed through thin, vulnerable coolant lines. A single 20-meter cannon shell, or even a well-placed machine gun round piercing a radiator or a coolant pipe, meant instant death. The engine would seize within minutes, trailing a telltale plume of white steam, forcing the pilot to bail out or crash. It was a design demanding precision, finesse, and the avoidance of sustained damage. It was the philosophy of the irreplaceable master. The P-47's R-2800 was the complete antithesis. It was a massive, air-cooled radial engine built on a foundation of sheer, rugged durability. Its cylinders were arranged in a wide circle, creating a frontal area that was clumsy and inefficient, hence the P-47's jug, or milk bottle, profile. Hermochen's contempt for this bulk was profound. He saw the drag as wasted energy, a crude solution to a refined problem. But the American engine's great secret was its lack of a vulnerable cooling system. The sheer, dense mass of the engine's front cylinders acted as a shield for the pilot, and the engine itself could absorb damage that would instantly kill any German equivalent. Stories already trickling back from captured pilots, tales that Hermochen dismissed as absurd propaganda, spoke of P-47s returning to base with entire cylinder banks missing, oil lines severed, yet still chugging along. The R-2800 was not an engine. It was a self-healing fortress, designed for industrial endurance, not surgical precision. This fundamental difference in durability meant the rules of the knife fight Hermochen had mastered were obsolete. The American pilot did not have to worry about a single fatal hit. He could afford to be hit, and often he was expected to be. The American system valued the life of the pilot, building a wall of steel around him, trusting the brute engineering to survive the inevitable. Hermochen's contempt only deepened when he considered the high-altitude secret weapon of the P-47, the General Electric turbo-supercharger. Above 25,000 feet, the air thins dramatically, robbing any engine, even the R-2800, of oxygen. Hermochen's FW-190 relied on a mechanical supercharger directly gear-driven by the engine. This system was efficient at medium altitudes, but it became a parasite at extreme height, stealing horsepower and making the engine gasp for air. The P-47's turbo, however, was a miracle of industrial ingenuity, albeit one that looked absurd. A mind-bogglingly complex network of exhaust ducts snaked from the massive radial engine, running the entire length of the fuselage, beneath the pilot's feet, all the way back to a turbine in the rear fuselage. This turbine was driven not by the engine's power, but by waste energy, the hot exhaust gases. The turbine spun a compressor at over 20,000 RPM, scooping up the frigid, thin air and ramming it, highly pressurized, back into the engine's carburetor. This complex, heavy system, which demanded the Thunderbolt's immense size, gave the R-2800 a secret second lung. While Hermochen's FW-190 was hitting its performance ceiling, becoming sluggish and losing speed, the P-47 was just hitting its stride. At 30,000 feet, the clumsy milk bottle became a thoroughbred, fast, responsive, and utterly dominant in the environment where Allied bombers flew. Hermochen realized the true tactical nightmare. The P-47 was not a low-altitude dogfighter to be scorned. It was an apex predator designed to hunt where his own machine could barely breathe. The Luftwaffe aces were being drawn into a new battlefield where all their advantages were stripped away. The flying milk bottle was revealing its terrifying secret. It wasn't built to dance. It was built to hunt in an environment where nothing else could breathe. The final, most terrifying mathematical truth lay in the concept of irreplaceability. Hermochen was one of the Reich's Experten, a highly trained, specialized ace. When a German ace was lost, the loss was catastrophic and often irreplaceable, consuming years of training investment. The American system, fueled by the staggering industrial power that Hermann Göring had mocked, a capacity that could produce a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes at Willow Run, did not rely on unique, irreplaceable warriors. It produced machines and pilots that were quantifiable and replaceable. American factories were designed for relentless, overwhelming scale, a production avalanche that rendered German scarcity irrelevant. If a P-47 was lost, the next one was already rolling off the assembly line. If a pilot was lost, another, less experienced but adequately trained, was ready to take his place. This was the dark irony of the P-47. Its weight, its size, its sheer industrial excess, the very things Hermichen mocked, were not weaknesses. They were the visible markers of a logistical, industrial philosophy that Germany could never match. The Fliegende Milchflasche was not a clumsy joke. It was a steel-tipped spear of American mass production, an engine of annihilation built to crush the German Air Force through sheer, relentless attrition. Hermichen had been looking for elegance and finding crude metal. He had been looking for a fencing partner and finding a sledgehammer. The duel he sought was impossible. He was not fighting a man or a machine. He was fighting a nation's entire industrial capacity, an overwhelming weight of steel and horsepower that would not yield to a single burst of German fire. The realization was colder and more chilling than the high-altitude air rushing past his canopy. He knew, with sudden, absolute clarity, that if he engaged this milk bottle again, he would be fighting not for glory, but for his own survival against the unstoppable force of industrial destiny. Sutin lang chikeo dai vai giai. Oberleutnant Hermichen, sauki toat koitam ban kua chietspeed 47s, ja tung tok jova leo len kao. Trai team anta japnhan kong fai vi so hai, ma vi suk fam sao sak. Chiek chai suabai, ja trung jan tab trung qua anta, nhunglai kong supjo, tam chi konjab trabang mot konbao, pontihuant kal vole. Anta quiet jin tushien mot guok tan kong tu hai, mot guok tan kong fai mang tin jin joat, chung min rang gethuat van chien tang sukman. Anta fai san lung kon moi nai mot kash, tan han va dut koat. Hermichen lat nguok mai bai, nhin qua kin hngam. Chiek P-46 safiven vano jo, giuvi tri bao vejoi hin nembom. Pikong mai duong hujan logi kwok tan kong truok. Hermichen kam thai mot sugyan du lan lung dang len. Lan nai, anta hong ham vao jonko, antan ham vao kan. Thepse fai chiu thua. Anta lai lao shuong, tok jo mai bai juk vuot, qua mok setensorke ko patrumi trong hai mat. Lan nai, anta sudung mot chien tuat fuk tap, loidung an nang choi loa tu fia, sau jeshemat joy tu. Trong buong lai fu 100 nefors, Hermichen ninto. Mui dao nong trong huang lai qua anta tron lan voi mui kim luai jan bi jun nong vi tang tok. Antan ham mak tieu, cho joy koan kach huan hao. Tep gap tep. Anta kai hoa, gyunut kich hoat lau hon mot shoot. Mot loat jan dwandi mitim va sat point nastin to antfotum dai, tab trung tuanbo, nang luong qua vu no vau fan gok kan trai qua chiek P-47. Anta thai ro rang kachman kim luai mau sang bongra, mot lutung lon hian ro tran matkan. Juroi. Mot chies mai bai bi tuong nang se bat jau truot, mat kiem soat va supjo. Hermichen keo kan lai, bai vut len va luon vong lai je chunkien chien thang. Nhung chiets P-46 toit van hong roi. No ching hieng sang mot ben mot chut, sau jo, voi mot tieng gam gu tach tuch tu jonko dwaitun kosto, no hin lai huong bai. Lut nai, Hermichen bat jau kam tai suso hai. Jai hong fai la mai bai. Jai la mot kon tu mai hong biet jau jon. Jung lut jo, ant ta thai mot chiets P-47 kas. Bai fia tren joy hein, lui lai mot chut. Ant tan han ra jo la chiets qua Major Robert S. Johnson, mot fikong matin, bau juk jankan bau la kuk ki hiu chien. Hermichen quit jin. Fai giet chet mot chiets P-47. But kugya now, anta kwelai, lauvau tan kong Johnson. Jolang guy 26 tang 6 nom 1943, hermachen fong het tokluk, chiech for senton litwomet kuantalamot juong kong hoan hau kuatok jovaichi. Antabat juak Johnson omot gok hep vakai hoa. Lanai, anta banka kau pau trusimiram duikan. Anta tai antlua, vakam nhanjuak sugyet man ki kau pau nangnikse tuach kong ki. Trung. Anta tai rorang nhong man filiuban ratu buong lai kua Johnson. Anta jatban trung buong lai, fa hui no. Manhin kua Johnson votan, dau tui luk futra, tautan mot man suang mukich matanta. Mot vien jan tfoint flim suyen kwanap kapo, lam rach mot juong tren song mui Johnson, mot vien kach lam vochiet jong hojeo tai kua anta. Tan mai baibik se tant nhiuman, nhuthe bibao jak suyen kwa. Hermachen tin rang fikong mai jan chet. Chiespi 47 bat jau lauk swong, mat kiem soat, taura mot luong hoi jen, chien tang, koi kung jen. Nhung hermachen jan hong, luong truoch juoch triet li tiet ke kua P47, chiet mai bai kua Johnson ja trung, iten hat dvaitseeton vien jan fauva, hang tram vien jan, 7.9 dipidrum. Kanchva juoi mai bai, lamot chik rai jung ngia. Nhung jong ko R-2800 van huat jong, ren ri nhung kong tat. Kach voi jong ko liquid cooled kwa juk, jong ko engine, built to a philosophy of rugged survival, continued to fire, a testament to American redundancy and manufacturing excess. Hermaken's mind, honed by years of single-stroke kills, could not process the anomaly. He had inflicted a mortal wound, yet the machine flew on. His frustration turned into a cold, professional rage. He pulled away from the shot-up Thunderbolt, banking hard and looping back for a decisive kill. He had ammo left. The American pilot was clearly trying to limp away. Hermischen closed in again, meticulously aiming for the unshielded oil cooler beneath the engine, the one weakness common to all fighter planes. He squeezed the triggers once more, unloading the rest of his 20mm cannon rounds in a final, concentrated burst. He saw the fire erupt this time, a thick, black smoke pouring from the American machine. He watched the P-47 fall into a shallow, uncontrolled dive towards the channel. Satisfied, Hermischen executed a final high-speed pass, banking his FW-190. He did not watch the P-47 hit the water. It was finished. He pulled back to join his formation, his gun camera recording the victory. But Major Robert S. Johnson, the pilot, was not finished. Trapped inside his mangled cockpit, the canopy jammed by the impacts, Johnson wrestled the controls of the dying P-47. The air-cooled R-2800 engine, wounded and spitting oil, stubbornly refused to die. Its radial design, once mocked as bulky, had become a wall of defensive steel. Hermichen, in his FW-190, had poured his most destructive rounds into a massive 2,800 cubic-inch steel cylinder block that simply absorbed the punishment. The liquid-cooled German engine would have died instantly. The American engine was a different beast, a fortress that bled, but did not collapse. Johnson, blinded by the hydraulic mist, the pressure gone, the control surfaces barely responding, flew that wreck across the English Channel. He landed at an Allied field and stepped out to count over 200 bullet holes in his machine. But he was alive. And his P-47, the flying milk bottle, was repairable. Hermischen, flying back across the front lines, was unaware of this miraculous survival. But the encounter had already inflicted a deeper, more profound damage upon him: the collapse of his belief system. He had spent his career mastering the art of the decisive, surgical kill. The P-47, through its sheer industrial mass, had rendered that art obsolete. It did not require skill to survive Hermichen's attacks. It required only thickness of armor, redundancy of systems, and the relentless, non-fragile nature of its engine. Hermichen began to view the P-47 not as an opponent, but as an industrial phenomenon. It was a machine that seemed to defy the rules of combat. You could not kill it by surgical strike. You had to destroy it by overwhelming brute force, a force that Germany, straining under a war economy starved of fuel and raw materials, could no longer muster. He thought back to the intelligence reports on American production, the relentless assembly lines, the overwhelming numbers of 15,000 P-47s planned, the infinite supply of parts. Hermichen suddenly understood the terrifying calculus. The P-47 was a weapon of attrition. Everyone he fought was simply one of many. Every successful kill only delayed the inevitable next encounter with a pilot who was adequately trained and sitting behind the Unkillable R-2800. The Thunderbolt was not a fighter. It was a visible symptom of America's manufacturing avalanche, a machine built to withstand the fight, not necessarily to win the duel. That single encounter with Johnson's P-47, the machine that would not die, marked the psychological turning point for Hermichen. His laughter was replaced by a cold dread. He was no longer fighting individual pilots for glory. He was fighting the combined industrial capacity of Detroit and the sheer, relentless will of a nation that could afford to wrap its young men in 17,000 pounds of steel. He recognized the terrifying new reality. In this war, the ultimate act of skill was endurance, and the final measure of worth was sheer, replaceable mass. Hermichen had won the battle on that day, but he had lost his faith in the German philosophy of war. The milk bottle was indeed filled with something, a torrent of overwhelming, unadulterated American industrial power that was about to drown the Luftwaffe. Oberleutnant Hermichen's narrow psychological defeat over the Channel, his failure to kill a machine that statistically should have been dead, was not an isolated incident. It was the chilling forecast for the entire Luftwaffe. The machine he fought, the P-47 Thunderbolt, quickly stopped being an object of ridicule and became an instrument of relentless industrial annihilation. The shift was driven by cold, ruthless data and the implementation of a single brutal tactical principle: boom and zoom. The philosophy of the Luftwaffe, centered on the irreplaceable, highly skilled ace fighting an elegant duel, was utterly incompatible with the P-47's strengths. You did not engage the Jug in a turning fight. You did not trade blows with the Unkillable R-2800 engine. The American Air Force, facing an initial performance deficit in maneuverability, formalized a tactic that leveraged the P-47's sheer weight and high-altitude dominance. The doctrine was simple, violent, and highly effective. Use the turbo-supercharger to maintain absolute energy superiority at 30,000 feet and above. Dive vertically onto the target, the Jug's 17,000 pounds of mass making it untouchable in a plunge. Unleash the hellstorm of 850 caliber guns and use the acquired speed to zoom climb straight back to altitude, ready for the next pass. The attack was impersonal, non-negotiable, and executed in seconds. It was the art of the sledgehammer. This tactic was perfectly suited for the American training pipeline. Unlike the Luftwaffe, which relied on its dwindling pool of experten, the United States had to rapidly produce thousands of pilots, many with comparatively few flight hours. Boom and zoom did not require the delicate, instinctive finesse of a turning fight. It required discipline, aggression, and faith in the industrial brute force of the aircraft. This meant that America could rapidly manufacture effective, lethal pilots, replaceable components in a vast, efficient machine who could consistently defeat German aces whose training and skills were irreplaceable. The industrial system had dictated the winning tactic. As the war progressed, the P-51 Mustang, with its incredible range and speed, took over the deep escort role for the strategic bombers. For any lesser aircraft, this reassignment would have meant obsolescence. For the Thunderbolt, it meant the beginning of its most feared and decisive chapter. the role of the Jabo, fighter bomber. The P-47's immense strength, once a logistical challenge, became its greatest asset for ground attack. Its rugged airframe could carry a truly terrifying payload, up to 2,500 pounds of bombs or a deadly spread of high-velocity 5-inch rockets, transforming the high-altitude interceptor into a low-level angel of death. This new role unleashed the P-47's destructive potential directly onto the arteries of the German war machine. Flying at treetop level, P-47 systematically hunted anything that moved: locomotives, railroad cars, fuel depots, troop convoys, and signal centers. The effect was cataclysmic. The chilling statistics compiled after the war confirm the totality of the P-47's ground destruction: over 86,000 railroad cars, 9,000 locomotives, and 68,000 trucks destroyed or severely damaged. The P-47 had dismantled the German logistical backbone, starving the front lines of fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. The tactical excellence of the German armored divisions, their Tiger tanks and Panzerfuhrs, was rendered irrelevant, paralyzed not by enemy armor, but by empty fuel tanks and shattered supply lines. The captured German colonel, Joachim Peiper's discovery of 50,000 gallons of American high-octane fuel during the Battle of the Bulge, only to realize it was a mere fraction of America's daily consumption, perfectly encapsulated the logistical abyss facing the Wehrmacht. The P-47 was the delivery mechanism for this logistical reality. The constant, brutal, low-level attacks induced a profound psychological breakdown among German soldiers known as Jabo Fever. The distinctive roar of the R-2800 engine, once a distant joke, became the sound of impending, unavoidable death. Soldiers instinctively dove for cover, knowing that visibility and speed had turned every open road into a kill zone. This psychological war was as effective as the .50 caliber rounds. The German military was paralyzed, unable to move men or material in daylight. The analysis was clear. The P-47 did not win by outturning the FW-190. It won by rendering the entire German system inoperable. It was a victory of industrial volume over technical refinement. While Germany struggled under constant Allied bombing to produce fewer than 100,000 aircraft throughout the entire war, the American production system, mocked by Hermann Göring, delivered nearly 300,000 aircraft, including 15,600 P-47s. Crucially, the P-47's ability to absorb damage and return to base, the core philosophy of the flying tank, meant that the American system retained its highly valuable, experienced pilots. When a German fighter was lost, the replacement pilot was often severely undertrained, a catastrophic loss in the attrition war. The American pilot, shielded by 17,000 pounds of steel and the self-healing R-2800, often returned to train the next generation. The P-47 Thunderbolt proved that the fate of the Luftwaffe was sealed not by a lack of skillful pilots, but by an inescapable mathematical equation. The German rate of loss was unsustainable against the American rate of production and system endurance. The laughter had faded, replaced by the grim knowledge that they were fighting not men, but a relentless, limitless industrial machine. The year 1945 brought the final, crushing silence to the skies once dominated by the Experten of the Luftwaffe. Oberleutnant Hermeken, if he survived the final chaotic months of the Reich, would have returned to a Germany physically devastated and spiritually defeated. His ultimate lesson was one of profound, cold humility, taught by the machine he once mocked. The P-47 Thunderbolt was the single greatest proof that in the deadly calculus of total war, industrial mass and relentless attrition would always triumph over specialized, irreplaceable skill. The war had ceased to be a duel of pilots and had become a statistical execution managed by assembly lines across the Atlantic. The P-47's victory was a philosophical one. Germany had believed in the aristocratic ideal of the warrior. The FW-190 was a finely tuned racing machine, and its pilot was a rare, cultivated talent. America had answered with the democratic ideal. The P-47 was a standardized, rugged utility truck, and its pilot, though highly trained, was an essential, replaceable component of a larger, unyielding system. This difference in philosophy was the true engine of defeat. When Hermican shot down one P-47, another rolled off the line an hour later, crewed by a pilot with hundreds of training hours who knew only the effective, brutal calculus of boom and zoom. When the Luftwaffe lost an ace like Hermican, the loss was catastrophic, years of irreplaceable skill vaporizing in a moment. Germany could not replenish its intellectual or material capital at the speed of America's factories. The P-47, once derided as the Fliegende Milchflasche, achieved an official kill-to-loss ratio that confirmed its transformation into a juggernaut, a force that simply crushed everything in its path. Its endurance was its ultimate weapon. The legendary story of Robert S. Johnson, surviving 21 cannon hits, was the perfect parable for the entire American war machine. It could be wounded, it could be battered, but it would not stop. This resilience directly translated into the P-47's second life as the Jabo fighter bomber. The destruction of 86,000 railroad cars and 68,000 trucks was not just collateral damage. It was a targeted, systematic dismantling of a nation's ability to wage war, forcing German soldiers to face the terror of Jabo Fever. The P-47's omnipresence created a state of constant psychological paralysis on the battlefield, proving that the most effective weapon is sometimes the one that attacks the enemy's will to move. This overwhelming logistical dominance echoed the broader reality exposed to German POWs in America. The impossible abundance of ice cream and Coca-Cola, the endless electric lights, the sheer industrial capacity that contradicted every lie the Nazi regime had ever told them. America was winning the war not just with guns, but with unlimited resources and a boundless confidence in its own production. The P-47 was the physical embodiment of this abundance, a plane that was heavy because America could afford to make it heavy, armed with 850 cal guns because America had the ammunition to feed them, and powered by an engine that could survive because America built it to survive. The P-47's legacy extended far beyond 1945. The design philosophy of a heavily armed, rugged ground attack specialist built around an unkillable engine found its direct spiritual successor decades later in the A-10 Thunderbolt II, Warthog. The A-10, equally bulky and mocked for its slow speed, was, like the P-47, designed for durability, massive firepower, and survivability in the face of ground fire. Both aircraft served as cold, brutal reminders that the war machine that embraces sheer, overwhelming, replaceable power will always defeat the one that relies on fragile, unique refinement. The final verdict on the P-47 is perhaps best summarized by the ultimate contrast. The German FW-190 was designed to hunt. The American P-47 was designed to endure the hunt and survive the war. In the end, the Luftwaffe's laughter at the flying milk bottle was a testament to their catastrophic failure to understand the industrial power of their adversary. Their scorn was the first casualty, quickly followed by their composure, their air superiority, and finally, their entire logistical system. The P-47 Thunderbolt was the brutal steel-tipped spear of the arsenal of democracy, a machine that taught the world the most crucial lesson of modern conflict. In the face of an avalanche, elegance is irrelevant. Only mass and persistence matter. The thunder of the R-2800 and the hammering of the 850 cal guns were the last sounds many German pilots ever heard. The deafening, industrial proof that the joke was, definitively, on them.